Who would have thought that 5-7 would be the new 7-5? We're in a brave new world now, folks. What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at Nerd Tees, and welcome to Double Digits, week number 10 of my weekly CFL football pick show for the 2023 CFL season, and I certainly didn't bury the lead there. 5-7 once again, second week in a row. I think I was 5-7, 2-2 straight up, 2-2 on the totals, which, my God, I don't know. We've had another week this year where I've gotten multiple totals right in the same week. Hooray! 2-2 on that. Only 1-3 against the spread last week, which is where I gave it all back. 5-7. I'm now a full 20 games below 500. Making the picks in the CFL this season obviously has been just sometimes feeling like an insurmountable year to try and do this job and do it the way that I do it. But let's look at it this way. Nobody wants to start their season 2-7. That's what I've done. I've had 2 good weeks in 9 weeks. I've started my season 2-7. The lucky thing is, this is a 21-game season. I've started 2-7. That doesn't mean the run can't still happen, because it can. It absolutely can. We can go on a white-hot tear to end all tears at any time. It could start any time. You got to have faith. You got to believe. Look, if I can ask you one thing, especially if you've been a viewer of mine for multiple years, you know I can go on these crazy hot streaks. I'm asking you to continue having faith. I have faith. I feel it coming. Now, unlike in some other weeks where the week might not have been the greatest picks-wise, but hey, at least I had a great week in fantasy. The bottom fell out in CFL fantasy for me last week. My first, truly, really bad week. And I mean, look, it was indicative that it wasn't going to be a good week when I didn't get Trey Odom's Dukes out of my lineup in enough time. He was a DNP in the game last week. I didn't get him out of my lineup. So I only brought in 47.7 fantasy points last week. Just awful. Outside the top 8,000 across the game. 631 in Derek Taylor's pool, which I think only has 800 some people in it. On the season, 836.7 points. I'm still inside the top 750 overall in the game, and I'm just outside the top 125 in Derek Taylor's league. Obviously, there's a ton of runway left in fantasy in this season, and I've been, really high up in that pool at certain points this season. I don't think the turnaround there is going to take much longer or take too much time. My most outstanding player, again indicative of the poor week I had in fantasy last week, was Montreal running back William Stanback. Shout out Alouettes, that's what we're wearing today. 19 carries for $1.06 on the ground. He did very well, 106 yards. That's only good for 10.6 fantasy points. Not involved at all in the pass game. No touchdown, so 10.6, and he was my top performer. Since it's Tuesday evening, I'm going to try to roll through this a little bit quicker than normal. 4-game slate in the CFL in Week 10. I'd originally thought it was only 3, but I must have missed the 4th game. We got the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in Edmonton taking on an Elks team coming off of a bye week. We got the Saskatchewan Roughriders in Montreal, where the Alouettes will play host. We got the Calgary Stampeders in BC to take on the Lions, and the Ottawa REDBLACKS on the tail end of back-to-back road games, facing a Toronto Argos team that has not only tasted defeat, but now finally gets to go home after 4 straight games away. Looking at the league-wide trends has me asking one question: what home field advantage? Because so far this season, there really hasn't been much of one. Home teams are just 1 game over 500 straight up, only 18-17, and road favorites are still the best against the spread bet to be made in the CFL this year at 9-6, good for 60%. Road teams overall are near 56% against the spread at 19, 15, and 1. So the friendly confines not being so friendly so far this season, but let's dig into our Week 10 slate of games, beginning with that Winnipeg in Edmonton matchup. Big flex for the Bombers last week. They demolished the BC Lions by 5 possessions. Just a monstrous game for them, scoring double digits in every single quarter. 14 points, 13 points, 10 points, 13 points. That is a first league-wide this year in 2023. They're the first team, are the Bombers from last week, to score double digits in every single quarter of a game. And honestly, I mean, the Bombers were better in every single area that matters, essentially, in that game last week. Zach Collaros decimating what I still feel is probably the CFL's best secondary. The ground game and the line of scrimmage absolutely belong to the Bombers in this one, putting up, outrushing, I should say, the BC Lions 129-63. And they registered 2 sacks, gave up 0. Zach Collaros had a clean pocket for the vast majority of the game. The secondary also generating 2 interceptions off of Dane Evans. Look, the Bombers are hitting the gas in their last 4 games. They lead the CFL both in offensive yards as well as points over that span. 1,740 yards in their last 4 games, putting up 130 points, and they have only allowed 70 points in that same span. Probably fair to assume that the Bombers are back. Also, shout out Kenny Lawler, a 200-yard receiving game. You think that guy's got a chip on his shoulder from having to sit out the first handful of weeks of the season? I think so. On Edmonton's sideline, the Elks remain winless after being shut out in Week 8 against the BC Lions. Again, kind of another rare instance where 2 teams are playing each other, having played the same opponent in their last game. And perhaps in an act of mercy at this point, Trey Ford has been handed QB1 duties coming out of the bye. And look, Einstein's definition of insanity. I'm a big Taylor Cornelius fan. I've talked about it all season long, but they generated just 12 first downs in that game last week. Absolutely nothing on the ground, 45 yards on 11 carries as a team, and Taylor Cornelius tosses his 8th and 9th interceptions, and not to mention, they took 177 penalty yards on 13 penalties, and I'm going to have something to say about that. And it really is an extra shame that this offense in Edmonton is so anemic at generating points. Because defensively, there are teams in this league that in the last month, 5-6 weeks, have been less efficient and are performing worse than the Edmonton Elks are. They're actually doing some things on defense. It might not seem like it, but they actually are, and it's just a real shame that the offense is completely incapable of keeping up. Listen, sometimes David beats Goliath, right? That's why that story is so compelling. That sometimes Goliath falls. Doctor Strange found the one path to beating Thanos. The problem is, Chris Jones does not have the time stone. Congratulations, Trey Ford. You're going to get the first crack at the starting job. Bombers roll. Obviously, give me Winnipeg in this one. Winnipeg goes into Edmonton and absolutely clobbers the Elks as far as I'm concerned. Winnipeg over Edmonton. Now, on the line, Edmonton is taking +12 at home as a dog, and that was kind of a tasty number. But the way that Winnipeg has turned everything around. Look, what were their biggest weaknesses that we've talked about this season? We talked about the defense kind of being a bit of a liability, didn't we? And we talked about the offensive line. Well, they just came out of a game against a team in BC with a good pass rush and gave up 0 sacks, and the defense has absolutely turned it around. Right now, top 3 in terms of defensive efficiency league-wide in the span of every team's last 4 games. So, they're all the way back, are the Bombers. So, I don't think those liabilities are liabilities anymore. Yeah, 12 points is a lot. It's less than 2 touchdowns. Do I think the Bombers are 2 touchdowns better than probably the worst team in the CFL? Yeah, I do. So, I'm going to go ahead and lay them -12. It's a lot of points, but we're seeing some real blowouts in the CFL this year. Give me the -12 on the Bombers. Total in the game set at 45, and I think I got to stick under on this one because while I do believe that Trey Ford will help them move the ball better, I don't necessarily know that Trey Ford is going to equate to a ton more points on the board, especially against a highly efficient defense, which is what the Bombers have been lately. So I think I got to stick under on this one because Edmonton's defense has also done some decent things, as I just mentioned. Let's go under 45 points in Winnipeg, Edmonton. Let's go Bombers 33, Elks 10. No reason to believe the Bombers don't get to 30 points here at least. And Edmonton, let's give them double digits and see what they do with Trey Ford under center. So let's go 33-10. Bombers win, Bombers cover, and give me the under on the point total. Let's go to Montreal now, where the Alouettes will play host to the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and on Saskatchewan's sideline, the Riders remain the CFL's cardiac kids coming out of last week, being gifted with a pretty controversial play call by Bob Dice, kicking that field goal from the 1-yard line after one of their own backfires, which is going for it on 3rd and 1 inside their own 30, I think they were. Like, they were well inside their own territory when they decided to make that play. You should be able to get, on both sides, you should be able to get a yard in this league. They give you a yard, so you should be able to get a yard. So it's not like I don't understand where the play calls came from, but they're both controversial play calls. So look, Ottawa got gifted one, and then they wound up giving it right back to the Riders, and they hold on for their 4th win of 4 points or fewer on the season. And I did the math on Twitter on this earlier. All of Saski's wins have been by 4 points or fewer and an average margin of victory of 2.5. Their losses, 3 of 4, have been by at least double digits, and the average is like 12. Like, when they lose spectacularly. They win by the skin of their teeth. This is probably faint praise coming from me, but that was probably Mason Fine's best outing of the year, I would say. Only 62% on his completions, which is not great, but he did throw for 296 yards and a touchdown. His efficiency was 96.2, far and away the best efficiency performance in his, I believe, 3 starts. So it might be some faint praise because it was only 1 touchdown, but he almost hits 300 yards. It was a good outing for Mason. Look, there were a lot of underlying numbers there for the Riders that leaned towards a loss. Like, they were only 3 yards per carry on the ground, which in the NFL you can get by with. The CFL, not really. 3 lost fumbles in that game, and they only possessed the ball for 26.25 minutes. So those numbers would lean towards, like, that team probably didn't win that game, except that they did. And their efficiency right now stinks on both sides of the football. They're number 8 in a 9-team league in terms of offensive efficiency, and dead last, number 9 in terms of defensive efficiency over the span of their last 4 games. But 6 quarterback sacks, which is what they registered on Dustin Crum, they make up for a lot of that, as well as going 17 of 22 were the Riders, 17 of 22 defensively on second down. So 22 second downs, they stopped them 17 times. That's a really, really high efficiency that gets you the football back in a lot of cases, and that is really what you can say led to this win for Saski. In Montreal, it wasn't pretty for a long stretch of that game, but the Alouettes dominate the 4th quarter, going on an 18-0 run over Hamilton, and allow the Ticats just 11 plays in the 4th quarter. I want you to think about this. So 4th quarter is 15 minutes long, right? They only allowed the Ticats to run 11 plays in the 4th quarter. That's long, sustained drives. Of those 11 plays that they allowed the Ticats to run, 3 of them were punts, and 1 of them was an interception. So 4 of those 11 plays changed possession. That's how dominant that 4th quarter was for the Alouettes. That leads them to a win that looks more lopsided than it really was. But all credit to this Alouettes team. Another great effort in the ground game. As a matter of fact, in their last 3 games, the Montreal Alouettes have exactly what I talked about in the run game. What do you need? The 2 things. You need consistency and you need efficiency, but consistency breeds success. I talked about it a week or 2 ago. They had commitment and consistency, 71 carries in their last 3 games. So that's 24 carries a game, and that has led them to success. 342 yards rushing. Only 1 rush touchdown, but they've only got 11 majors on the season, so it's no shock. But they've averaged 24 for $114 over their last 3 games. That's commitment to the run game, and it has bred success for William Stanback and the Montreal Alouettes. Plus a nice bounce-back game last week for Austin Mack. Was his first 100-yard game since Canada Day against the Bombers. I'm not really loving the way the Alouettes have been trending over the last few games, and they still obviously mightily struggle to score touchdowns. They've only scored 6 in their last 5 games, and that included scoring 3 in one game. So the other 4 games in that stretch, They only scored 3. So this team really struggles to put the ball in the end zone, but back-to-back wins for the Alouettes, keeping them second place in the East Division, certainly in the thick of the playoff conversation. And apparently we have to be on Cody Fajardo watch, because there's some speculation kind of running rampant that Fajardo might not start this game. Jason Moss came out and said, hey, if I was a betting man, I would bet that Cody plays. But I think we got to kind of at least pay attention to that a little bit, because you know how these things tend to change. I'm not super high on either team here, honestly, despite the fact that they both won last week, but I'm not really super high on them. This is the Riders' third road game in their last 4. They've lost their last 2 games big. Now, granted, that was against BC and Toronto, their last 2 road games, I should say. So they lost both of those big. The path to victory here, I think, is the widest for the Montreal Alouettes. That's the way I'm going to go in this one. Let's take the Alouettes at home to get the win over the Riders. Now, on the line, the Alouettes are laying -4 here as a home favorite. I like this number better than what it opened at. It opened at -5.5. So I like that number a little bit better. I'm going to go ahead and lay those points. That, again, if I'm taking the Riders to lose, you might as well take them to lose big, because that's been the way that they've been trending this season. So let's lay the -4 on Montreal. Total in the game set at 44.5. I don't think this is a game that is much at risk of going to overtime. And we talked a week or 2 ago about non-overtime games. They're really heavily trending under here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to stick under in this game. Certainly helps that, again, like we talked about, the Riders' offensive efficiency is terrible. Their defensive efficiency isn't great either. Montreal's kind of been treading water in both of these instances, but in both cases are better than the Riders. So we're going to stick under in this one just because, again, it seems to be the way that the league is going. Let's go Alouettes 26, Riders 14. So this is still a competitive football game. It's 2 possessions, but I think it stays under the point total. So Alouettes win, Alouettes cover the -4, and give me under on the points. Midway point of the episode, and you know what that means. It means it's time to shout out my great friends and sponsors at NerdTees. NerdTees.ca is where you need to go to find yourself dozens and dozens of incredible loose leaf tea, as well as estate and flavored coffee blends. No matter what the caffeine drinker in your life likes, you are going to find something for them on nerdtees.ca, and when you do, you're going to want to use my promo code, which is BWFinest. That's going to save you 15% at checkout. You're going to get free shipping in Canada on any order over $100, which is an excellent value. You're also going to get a great conversion rate on the US dollar if you're one of my viewers in the United States. Today's blend is Tropical Fire. It's one of the newer blends that I've tried with NerdTees. I really, really like it. Smells incredible, especially as soon as you open the bag. You just get hit with that scent, and it's just fantastic. Makes an excellent cup of tea as well. That is one of just a litany, if you will, of great, great tea and coffee options that you're going to find on nerdtees.ca. Once again, nerdtees.ca. Promo code BWFinest, save you 15%, get your free shipping, find yourself something to love, or find someone you love something to love. You can do it on nerdtees.ca. Back half of the week here, where we see the Calgary Stampeders travel to the farther west coast to take on the BC Lions. Now for Calgary, the Stampeders slay the beast of the East last week, a multi-possession win over the Toronto Argos, where the defense absolutely pitches a gem after Chad Kelly leaves the game due to injury. Only 10 first downs allowed by that Calgary defense, 218 total yards allowed by them, and they were 55% on second down. So stopping more second downs than they allow to be converted. Again, a lot of that came after the Chad Kelly injury. Chad started that game hot, but then of course had to leave, I believe, in the second quarter. So things might have been different, but we can only go with what happened. And what happened was Calgary's defense looked fairly good. This was also a punishing effort on the ground for the Calgary Stampeders. 36 carries for 168 yards on the ground, which included 137 on 27 from Dedrick Mills. This is his first game above 36 yards rushing or with 12 or more carries since July 7th. So just about a month. And he finally got involved with the offense the way I feel a player like him should be involved in the offense. Now, what's really interesting to note, who started practicing again today and practicing in full? Ka'Deem Carey. I'm not saying he's going to be back this week, but the fact that he is now practicing in full, that should worry a lot of teams in the West Division, because as soon as Ka'Deem Carey comes back, the entire context of this Stampeders offense, which has been trending up anyway, the total context of that offense changes. Jake Maier was also hyper efficient in that game, completing 22 of 24 passes, but didn't really do a whole lot with it, 149 scoreless yards, but it was his first game of the year where he didn't throw an interception, so thumbs up. Again, like I mentioned, it is undeniable that this Stampeders offense has turned a corner here. Over their last 4 games, they're averaging 375 total yards and 28 points on the board. That's per game. So that's a really good average over the last 4 weeks. But even with this game that they had, this really strong defensive game against the Argos, the Stamps' defensive efficiency is still second worst in the CFL over that 4-game span. And I genuinely feel it continues to limit the upside of the Stampeders in a competitive West Division. Ka'Deem Carey coming back, again, probably changes that. For the BC Lions, they get absolutely dog-walked by a rejuvenated Winnipeg Blue Bombers team, losing big and losing Dane Evans to injury. So obviously the big play VA watch is officially on for this week. I do have to point out that after practice today, Coach Rick Campbell did come out and say, signs are definitely pointing towards Vernon being ready to play this week. So they should be getting their QB1 back, which probably means good things for the Lions. Dane Evans and Dominique Davis, who had to come into this game after Evans got hurt, combined to go just 20 of 39 for 189 yards through the air, 2 interceptions from Dane Evans, which again was just kind of emblematic of their whole team performance. God bless Taquan Mazzell, because he was trying in this one, touched the ball 13 times, turned it into 72 all-purpose yards. He was essentially their best offensive player, but it got ugly for them, and just kind of a game that you kind of want to burn the tape on. Now, luckily, every team is kind of allowed a mulligan here. Like, BC handed Winnipeg theirs back in week 3. Winnipeg handed it back last week. So there is a rubber match coming up in a couple of weeks, which everyone should be very excited about. And you got to imagine that BC's secondary, again, so good and built up here over multiple seasons, you got to imagine they're going to be hungry for redemption after giving up 447 yards passing to Collaros. They're still the second most efficient defense over the span of every team's last 4 games across the CFL, but they're going to be hungry to not have a repeat performance. Like I mentioned, last week was Jake Maier's first 0 interception game of 2023. The Stampeders might get to take advantage of a backup quarterback again, because everybody can say what they want on after practice on a Tuesday when the game is not until the weekend, so you never really know what's going to happen there. But even if it is Dominique Davis in this game, Double D has the experience to win this game, and again, I expect a defensive rebound, but it looks like it's going to be Vernon Adams, which I think spells good things for the BC Lions here. I'm going to go ahead and grab the BC Lions, who I believe are still undefeated at BC Place this year. Let's take the Lions to get the win over the Stamps. Now on the line, the Lions are laying -6 here, so almost a full touchdown. The number has come up. It was -5 when it opened, so obviously the news of Vernon Adams probably starting in this game is definitely adjusting this line. I think I'm still going to lay the -6. It's under a touchdown. The Lions are one of those top 3 elite teams in the CFL, and we may just kind of be getting to a point here where don't think too hard about it and lean on the best teams. Those 3 best teams, BC, Winnipeg, and Toronto. Just lean on them. So that's kind of what I'm going to do here. I'm going to go ahead and lay the points on the BC Lions at home. Total in this game set at 45.5 points. And once again, I'm going to stick under on this. The Lions offensive efficiency actually worse than the Stampeders is right now. And I understand I just talked about the Stampeders' defensive efficiency being really poor. But even after that showing that they had last week, the BC Lions still the second most efficient defense in the CFL. I think the defense has a nice bounce back performance. Let's go ahead and take the under on the points here in BC and Calgary. Let's go Lions 27, Stampeders 17. So 10-point win for BC. Let's lay the -6 on the Lions and give me the under on the 45.5 point total. And the fourth and final game of the week sees a Battle of Ontario, the Ottawa REDBLACKS traveling to Toronto to take on the Argos. Now, the REDBLACKS dropping a 2-point decision at Mosaic Stadium to the Saskatchewan Roughriders last week. I think it was 26-24, the final. Another game I'm willing to say they probably, quote-unquote, had no business losing, although that's a phrase that some people have not liked me using in the last couple of weeks. Even though they trailed that game by as many as 12 points in the third quarter. So I understand they trailed for most of that game. But that fourth quarter comeback was real. And I'm usually a pretty staunch take the points guy. I have to admit some existential crisis in that. Man, you're on the 1 yard line. Like, you're on the 1. I think you just got to go. 195 scoreless all-purpose yards for Dustin Crum in that game, who now has just 435 APY and 0 touchdowns in his last 2 games. He does have 1 interception, however. So, look, if you're not scoring touchdowns, the all-purpose yards are nice, but you're also a quarterback, so you would expect that number to even be higher than it is. That's in back-to-back losses against very beatable defenses. 2 straight games against very beatable defenses. But I also have to at least partially blame his offensive line, who has allowed him to be sacked 13 times and certainly hit more than that. They share in those struggles in a big bad way. Listen, as you can certainly tell, I have a lot of faith in this offensive efficiency, defensive efficiency model. I believe in this model that says that this Ottawa REDBLACKS team has elite level efficiency on offense. But that same model highlights the fact that the defense has started to lag behind. Entering week 6, so through the first 5 weeks of the season, entering week 6, it took 19 yards on average for an opponent of the Ottawa REDBLACKS to put a point on the board. Okay? Took an average of 19 yards in order to put a point on the board. That number has been 14.6 over the last 4 games. So it's gone from 19 to 14.6. Let me put it to you another way. If Ottawa's playing a team and they give up 400 yards, all right? They give up 400 yards on defense. It's the difference between that opposing team scoring on average 21 points to now 27.5. That's a fairly big difference when you really sit down and think about it. 6.5 points, essentially a touchdown. So that level of efficiency or lack of efficiency comparative to the earlier part of the season, it's a big deal. And it shows that even though Ottawa's efficiency on offense is still very high and has been in the last 4 weeks, the defense is not playing up to a similar level that they were earlier in the year. We go to the Argos side of things now, and look, everybody's got to lose eventually. Teams simply do not go undefeated in the CFL unless you're the 1948 Calgary Stampeders. They went undefeated, but it's been quite a while. So unless you're the 48 Stamps, you don't go unbeaten. But I'm sure that losing Chad Kelly probably was not in the plan. Now, Dave Naylor earlier today on Twitter tweeted that all signs seem to be pointing towards Chad Kelly playing this week as the Argos head into, I believe, their final bye of the season. So, I mean, they are going to have a long stretch here towards the end of the season, but there's a pretty good chance that Chad Kelly is still going to play in this game. So that's something you got to sort of keep an eye on here, but it looks like he probably will. Shout out to Cam Phillips, a receiver for the Argos, who had some preseason fantasy football hype that was through the roof. If you looked at the projections for the first couple of weeks for Cam Phillips, they were like 9 and 10 and 11 points. They really expected, did the CFL fantasy people, that Cam Phillips was going to start the season with a bang. Didn't really happen, but he finally lived up to that hype with a season-high 94 yards receiving last week and his first receiving touchdown of 2023. I understand why the hype was there. He finished the season very strong last year. Didn't really start off great this year, but is coming off of a very good game. Beyond that, the offense was mostly anemic and had very little opportunity, possessing the ball for less than 21 minutes with that incredible game plan last week by the Calgary Stampeders. Again, there was speculation here that the Argos might choose to rest Chad Kelly until after the bye. It looks like he's probably going to play, but in the event that he doesn't, it looks like Cameron Dukes is the next guy up for the Argos at quarterback. And the upside of this offense is definitely in doubt. We just saw it. We saw what he was able to do. And look, it's a tough spot for him to come into, obviously, but it's an exceptionally inexperienced quarterback room, which a lot of people are talking about in between weeks here. His only other pro experience was one season in the Indoor Football League. Yeah, he threw 27 touchdowns, but he only threw for 1,100 yards because it is indoor football. So it's a very different context. And if it is Cameron Dukes, the upside of this offense is very limited. And the potential lack of Chad Kelly does make this game very compelling. But it's very worth pointing out that the Red Blacks have yet to beat an East Division opponent this year. All of their wins have come against West Division teams. Kind of entering gotta-see-it territory for the Red Blacks here against not only a division opponent, but one of the elite teams in football. I don't think they step to that challenge this week, especially where it looks like Chad Kelly's going to play, and that just gives that offense that boost of confidence and, for lack of a better term, swag that Chad Kelly brings. And the command, and again, a touchdown Atlanta, getting to watch, it wasn't a great game for him, but the way he commanded the offense, watching him organize that offense, this guy's a great quarterback. He's not a good quarterback. He's a great quarterback. And he's going to show that here in the next year or two, assuming, please, he stays in the CFL. I'm on the Argos here. They've been pretty good at home this year. Ottawa's struggled on the road, and this is back-to-back road games for them. So let's grab the Argos to get the win at home over Ottawa. Now, the lines for this game are exceptionally interesting. So when they opened, the lines opened at 2 or 3 different sports books. And they opened with the Argos laying 10.5 and the total being 48.5. Wow. Then the news about Chad Kelly, actually he was out, he got hurt. Well, what's that going to look like? And all of a sudden the lines just cratered, like free-falled. Right now, the Toronto Argos are only laying -4 in this game. And the point total is at 41.5. So run out to your local sports book to take advantage of these numbers while you can. So look, Toronto -4. Thank you very much. I got no problem laying -4 on probably the second best team in the league. Let's go ahead and do that. Argos -4. Total in the game, 41.5 points now. Over, because the league is trending under, but my God, it's 41.5 points. It's absolutely nothing. So we're going to go ahead and take the over on the 41.5 points in Toronto, Ottawa. Let's go Argos 28, Red Blacks 19. So obviously Argos win, Argos cover. Give me the over on the 41.5 point total. And thanks, Vegas. I appreciate that. There you go, folks. Those are your picks for Week 10 in the CFL. We'll go over them here with you one more time. I got the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in Edmonton beating the Elks 33-10. I'm laying the -12 on Winnipeg in a game that stays under 45 points. I got the Montreal Alouettes at home beating the Saskatchewan Roughriders 26-14, taking Montreal to cover -4 against the spread under 44.5 points. I got the BC Lions at home beating the Calgary Stampeders 27-17. So I'm laying -6 on the hometown Lions in a game that stays under 45.5 points. And I got the Toronto Argos beating the Ottawa REDBLACKS 28-19 in Toronto. So taking the Argos -4 in a game that goes over 41.5. Now, it's Tuesday evening, so you know what that means. Can't put my fantasy roster on solidified on paper at this point, but this is how I'm leaning this week. At quarterback, almost certainly has to be Zach Collaros after the incredible game he put up last week and facing one of the worst defenses in the CFL. I might look at Chad Kelly because, again, we talked about how Ottawa's defensive efficiency not really keeping up with the offense. I might look at Dustin Crum because the defense has been something, the total defense anyway, has been kind of a problem for the Argos this season, especially through the air. The secondary has struggled, so maybe I might look at Crum again, but these last two performances have not left a good taste in my mouth. At running back, Brady Oliveira is a layup this week. Probably take another look at William Stanback. Have to see maybe what his price is. Taquan Mazzell for BC, that's certainly going to be a possibility. AJ Ouellette, I got to feel pretty strong about Calgary's run defense, one of the worst in the CFL. Maybe Jamal Morrow, depending on price. Wide receivers, certainly if I go with Zach Collaros, there will be a stack with the Winnipeg offensive pieces. And I think I want as many pieces of Winnipeg this week as I can possibly get. So I wouldn't be surprised maybe if I even roll 2 Bombers receivers there. Those top guys in Montreal, Kai and Julian Grant, will hopefully be back this week. Austin Mack coming off of that first 100-yard game since Canada Day. A Toronto receiver, I mean, I might go with Cam Phillips, see if he can build on that performance from last week. Sean Bain for the Riders, even if I don't like the Riders to win, Sean Bain has been lighting it up over the last 4 or 5 weeks. And I might see if I can grab one of those Ottawa receivers, because again, Toronto's secondary has struggled this season. And if Crum can kind of stretch the field a little bit, there may be some value in Ottawa's receivers. And on defense, Min Cash. I'm going to take a look once they're posted, take a look at what the costs are of the defenses. The Montreal Alouettes might be a sneaky option here, but I'm just going to take a look at the cost and probably try to spend as little money as possible on the defensive side. That's the show for you, folks. Week 10 now in the books. Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at Nerd Tees. Thank you so much for tuning in on this Tuesday evening edition of my weekly CFL football pick show. Enjoy the games in Week 10. Let's start that turnaround. We'll see you again for week number 11.